I realized, hey, I could have more impact and put people away for a longer time, like violent people, if I leave the NYPD and jump ship and go to the Fed. So I did. So I was 35 years old, sucked because I had to go through the academy, 6 months at the academy. And I was always a big dopey weightlifter because I was a skinny kid. So as a cop,
Yeah.
you want to put on some size. So if you have to put hands on somebody, they know you're there. Because when I first started, the bigger guys could have threw me like a kite. So by the time I went to the ATF Academy, I could bench press 350 pounds, all that stuff, but I couldn't run a quarter mile without like sucking wind. And down there, it's all calisthenics and running. So man, let me tell you, I was never at the back of the pack, but I was never at the front of the pack. When I went to the academy with guys like 23, 25, 27 years old, I was one of the old timers. There were a couple others that had time on the job like myself, but yeah, it was an eye opener, very humbling.
That's Glencoe, Georgia?
Yeah.
A little bit humid there too, huh?
I was going to say, what time of year was it, Pete?
It was May. And yes, it was humid.
You started in May? Oh, yeah.
It was humid, number one. Number two is you have those sand fleas down there that get all, and the instructors, like back then, Border Patrol was also down at Fletsy. Now they moved to a different Fletsy, I think in Artesia, New Mexico. So you didn't have your own agency's instructors teaching you. You had whoever. The Border Patrol instructors were brutal. And I remember one time they had us doing leg lifts where you're sitting there laying on your back, doing repetitions on a pile of like fire ant hills. So they're doing leg lifts, and these guys are laughing their ass off, torturing you while you're getting gnawed at by all kinds of bugs. It was just an interesting place. I loved it. In hindsight, it was a great time. It was like going to college again, but it had its moments.
I got to think with your background though, Pete, when you went through there, the instructors did looked at you to be a leader within the class and to mentor some of the younger people with your background?
Yeah, truthfully, yeah. Some of the instructors treated me differently. Some of them, I actually think he may have even looked up to my experience. But it was because there's a bar on the campus.
Right.
And back then, they weren't as strict with fraternization. So I'd go to the bar every night. Because, look, the first school that you go to is Criminal Investigators Training Program, which a lot of it's very basic stuff. So I don't want to pretend I knew everything, because I had to learn the federal way, but a lot of it was a repetition of what I had already learned. And the first half, before you go to the ATF specific school, was actually a lot of running, but it wasn't physically brutal. So I'd go every day. After class, I'd go to the gym, go to the Fletsy cafeteria, eat that horrible food. Mm-hmm. And then I would go to the G bar, they called it. And sometimes the instructors would come and drink with us, which was interesting. They don't do that now. But so I'd sit there and hold court with these guys who were teaching me, which was weird. Heard some great stories, though. And the interesting thing, I worked with ATF in New York, but things are different in different parts of the country. Crime trends are different. So it was interesting to hear the stories from instructors and senior agents who came down to teach, who worked in other parts of the country. Or even one guy, I remember his name was Jamie Ballesteros, came in and was talking about the stuff that he was doing in Mexico. And at the time, I didn't even know ATF had a presence in Mexico. So I was like sitting there like, wow, this is really cool. It was fun.
And then, so you graduate the academy there. What's your first assignment with ATF? Were you in New York originally, or where did they send you originally?
Yeah, I got sworn in New York, sworn in at the World Trade Center. I didn't go through the academy till I had almost 2 years on the job because of 9/11. So I got sworn in June of 2001. 9/11 happened. They kept me in New York. I was involved in rescue and recovery for a while. I was there on day one, right after the first plane hit, stayed on site for a few days, wound up many years later getting lung cancer, losing the right lung to 9/11 related cancer. Never smoked a cigarette in my life. But so I worked mostly home invasion cases and gang cases, and still in the Bronx because they let me stay up in the Bronx because I knew the area. And even worked a lot with the DEA Red Rum group in New York as a detective. And I continued to work with them as an ATF agent because my boss, because I had so much time with NYPD, he gave me a lot more latitude than he probably should have. I had a desk at the Southern District of New York because we were doing a lot of those trigger lock cases, what we call them. I had a desk at Red Rum and I had a desk at our office, and I just bounced between the three, but it was great. Look, we made some good cases, had a significant impact, but I was there for about 6 years.
So explain to people what Red Rum was back then.
Well, Red Rum, at least during my time working with them, they were a faction of DEA that was staffed with NYPD detectives, DEA agents, and New York State troopers. At least that's who staffed it in the 5 or 6 years that I worked with them. And they focused on drug-related crimes involving murder. And they were doing a ton of home invasion cases where you had folks dressing up as police, doing robberies of stash houses, just not dressing up as police, just doing robberies like regular folks. But the interesting thing was back in those days, you'd have cases where you'd arrest one guy, you'd start proffering him and find out about, well, we had one case, and it wasn't the biggest case that they had done. It was the biggest case that I worked with them that had 21 defendants, roughly 145 home invasion robberies, 6 murders, kidnapping on one crew. And it all came out of going after folks like being felons in possession of firearms, proffering them, and then going and following up on the information you'd get in proffers. And there was another case, I helped a little bit on it, but this guy, Billy Relat, who was a rock star in DEA, he had a case on this guy, Segundo Batista was the main defendant's name. That crew did over 200 robberies. These were prolific robbers. And the weird thing is most of those jobs didn't get reported because they were robbing drug dealers.
Mhm. Right.
But what would happen is sometimes they would get the wrong information and they would hit the wrong house and go in. And those were pretty barbaric crimes because they go into a house thinking there's drugs or drug money in there. And when the people are saying, hey, I don't have it, they think they're being bullshitted too. So they would burn them, like put a knife on the stove and let it get red hot and then burn them with a knife, or take an iron, plug it in. Where's the money? I don't have the money. Burn them. So it was pretty horrific to see some of the things that would happen. But the reality was they were in the wrong house. So it's not like people were holding out on them. They didn't have anything to give, but the guys doing the robberies, because they got information from what they used to call Santeros, they thought they were in the right house. So it was bad. So, but luckily when those cases would get reported, that would give us sometimes a springboard on being able to at least have a witness who potentially could identify somebody. And then, so some of the cases that we would investigate wouldn't be reported, but some would. And it just helped put the puzzle pieces together.